Hi everyone and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. It's so great to see you all and thank you for all coming. So we're going to be talking about marketing hacks to attract the right investors. We've got with me today Anthony Rose from SeedLegals and Vanessa Kent. So I'll hand them over to introduce themselves in a second, but just to know, there is on the right hand side of your screen, there's a questions tab. So if you can be asking any of your questions in there, then we can go through it as we go through the hour and make sure we answer as many as possible and really help you on your way. Okie doke, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Anthony.
Hello, I'm Anthony Rose. I'm founder and CEO at SeedLegals, the #1 place for closing your funding rounds in the UK. Apart from doing all the legals in the rounds, personally, I love helping founders get investment ready. We do a pitch deck clinic and we talk to lots and lots of founders on their journey. So hopefully I'll be able to share some insights on how to attract investors to get them to want to invest in you.
Fantastic. And Vanessa, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Ness. I'm head of marketing for Coconut. We're a bookkeeping tax app for sole traders and we're coming up to about 3.5 years old now, and actually just in the process of launching our third crowdfunding campaign. So hopefully I can share some of what we are up to at the moment and what we've done in the past to give you some ideas for your campaigns as well.
Fantastic. And I'm Lucy, I'm part-time CMO and the founder of ScaleUp, which is a marketing hub for tech startups. I've spent my entire career just launching products, and lately, in the last few years, that's Skype for mobile and Starling Bank and Yolt. So let's get going. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was preparation. How do you get ready? And especially from a marketing point of view, what do you need to do before you start approaching investors and start talking about it publicly? Vanessa, as you're right in it at the moment, maybe you could kick this one off.
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting one because last year was my first sort of foray into this territory, and it was quite a shock to the system, in that it's incredible actually how much preparation is actually involved, and particularly because when I'm talking about sort of crowdfunding specifically, because that's sort of where I've got most experience, but the sort of moment of which you actually sort of launch your campaign on your chosen platform is really sort of the end of the campaign, if you like. There's so much work that goes into it before that even gets started that it's really important to sort of think of it in these sort of 3 main phases, I think, really, which is kind of like the initial preparation. So that, for me, the most important part is preparing your pitch deck. So Anthony, you just mentioned workshops on that because it's such a critical part. Getting that narrative and that story really sharp from the beginning is kind of the foundation, really, of your entire campaign, because that's all of that messaging and storytelling that you do in that part is really what you then build into the rest of your market. It all just falls out from there. So if you get that right from the beginning, then you'll be fine. But if it's not quite tight enough, you'll realize quite quickly, and it'll become quite challenging trying to balance lots of different materials, saying slightly different things and kind of sharpening it as you go. So I definitely say give yourself plenty of time on the pitch deck side at the beginning, and also get that in front of people quite early. Potential investors and people that you can have quite honest conversations with to get feedback, so you can really tighten your story. And then that's the sort of the main phase, really, after you've got that deck ready, is then kind of like figuring out how you're going to tell that story to as many people as possible, get people really excited about what you're doing. And there's kind of a few key assets, I suppose, that are kind of foundational to your campaign that everybody pretty much will have, which is obviously your deck, which we've talked about, some sort of landing page or digital space where you can tell that story and get people to sign up, so you can add them to a mailing list and keep sort of sharing news and stories with them throughout your campaign. Figuring out your actual marketing plan, so how you're going to tell that story, what channels you're going to use, what cadence of interaction you're going to have with the people, and figure out what list you've got to actually share that story. So if you're very new and you don't necessarily have big followings from social or big lists yet, you want to start thinking about how you can build up your presence in those places to get more eyes across what you're doing. And another kind of a quite fun part actually that I particularly enjoy is actually creating a pitch video, which you see people being really creative with these, and there's loads of really great examples out there. But again, it's just another way to like engage people behind what you're doing in a slightly different medium, slightly more engaging way of telling that story. We're actually filming one of ours later this week. It's a really fun process as well, kind of like getting the team involved, figuring out how you can bring as many people and customers into that process to help tell your story. Yeah, preparation is key because there's a lot of work to do.
Anthony, how would you how can you add to that?
Well, thank you for that. So I think that I'll start by saying you want to pick the class of investors that you want to be targeting. And I think they might broadly fall into three classes. Number one are angel investors. So these are people you find that you might know them. It's informal. And in the earliest phase, in fact, you don't need very much prep. You can just meet somebody over dinner and tell them what you're doing. And they go, that sounds interesting. Tell me more. So hold that thought. The next one are VCs. So VCs are going to be very much led by the investment committees that have to justify what they're doing. So they're going to want to do a lot of due diligence. They're going to be focused on the financials. And so to prep for them, you're going to have your work cut out before you get there. And the third group, which Vanessa has spoken about, is crowdfunding. And there it's all about the door's open, it has to pop. It's all about, people are going to see the few slides or the hero image, the Insta photo, and they're either just going to pass right by your pitch, your little rectangle on the crowd platform, or they're going to want to dive in. So I think if you take a step back and think of it like this military operation, what things will you need to do for each of these audiences? But I think what's in common to all of them is that investors come in a range of flavors. Some of them are really driven by the Excel spreadsheet. They kind of don't care what you do. They just want to look at the traction graph at the end. And that tends to be for later stage companies which have revenue. You want to invest in SeedLegals. Maybe at some point you don't care about what we do. You just look at the month-on-month numbers and you go, great, that looks like a good story. But if you're earlier stage than that, then you need to win people over with the story. And I like how Vanessa said it's the story, because like a Hollywood drama, you need to reel people in with an exposition, and then you start off with what world problem you're solving, and then it's about how you're solving it, and then it's about the traction, and then it's about what you're looking for. But as part of the prep well beforehand, I think as a kind of wannabe investor, what I like to do is I never believe what people put in their pitch deck. I like to do my own research. So I'm going to start Googling the company. And if I see zero information on it, it's not a good sign. But if they keep popping up everywhere, they're in news articles, they're writing blog posts, they've got thought leadership pieces, they're at events, then it's like you guys are everywhere. So I think the prep starts well before, months before, where even when it's a twinkle in your eye, that you the concept, you start writing articles, and you see, even you create a website, you make some nice messaging on the website, make it look as much as possible like you're open for business. Because one of the key things I do is, with my investor hat on, is that if the company's webpage talks about the future of blockchain or Bitcoin, I know they haven't built anything yet. When you go to booking.com, they don't tell you how insanely clever their AI is for matching. They just go, where do you want to go today? So you need to dress up everything to make it look like you're bigger than you are and you're open for business. And that starts well beforehand, and all the materials out on the internet. And then you get started on the pitch deck. So sorry for a long answer to that question.
No, and I love that. And I think you touched on the really important thing, is that actually remembering that investors are looking for the same thing that your customers or clients are. And that is, how are you actually going to be solving a problem for them? Is there an addressable market that your product or service is actually going to be connecting with? So
I'm sorry, can I just hop in on that one? Because too often, and this is a passion point for me, I see pitch decks for investors that talk to investors differently to customers. So it focuses on explaining how clever the B2B APIs are and all this other stuff. But I agree with you. I think investors look at it as if they're a consumer. And if they understand from your pitch deck why a consumer would want this, then they think it will be a success and they want in. So I think at least the first couple of slides of your pitch deck should be almost like your website, the fastest way to do X, insanely changing the world of insurance or debt collection or whatever, rather than, we use sophisticated APIs. It's like, yeah, we'll get to that on slide 8, so yeah.
100%.
And just another thing, actually, just to throw into that, because I totally agree with what you're saying there, Anthony, of like, this actually starts like 6 months out. Like, this is still a twinkle in your eye of a potential plan. But another really actually helpful thing to have as part of this is a good flow of customer reviews. That's one of the things that we often see investors actually going and looking when they're doing their own research, is going and looking across various review platforms. So that's Trustpilot. For us, we're an app, so app and Play Store, and it's really important actually to have a really solid foundation of reviews. If they're all really new and all really positive, it's like red flag. But also, of course, you want to make sure that you've got plenty of good ones in that show off your products as well. So, and that can take a while to get in place.
Yes, and we can see all that social proof on social channels, in the picture itself, on your website. So there's plenty of ways that they can see that. And I think one of the things that it's important to think as well is that your social media and your website, as well as building awareness, they're also the places that they'll first go for research. So even so not to worry so much if you're not getting huge likes and comments on the posts as you think about it, but think about it at the point at which an investor first gets that pitch deck and they go onto your LinkedIn to see what you've been writing about. And that's where you want to make sure you understand your audience, your thought leader in your niche, you've got your social proof, and they get excited about that. So that's a good one, and you just touched on how far in advance, like how many, like let's put a number of months on this, like how far in advance should people start preparing to invest? Anthony, what do you think?
Well, let me give you an example. There's I love buying things from our SeedLegals customers, by the way. So when I happen to see on our Slack channel that someone started a round or signed up and they've got a company name that looks like there's food I can buy, I'll go buy it for our team and so on. And one that I was thinking of recently is a tea company. So, there are lots of tea companies. What's going to attract investors? And, they're going to talk about the finest green teas and whatever it is. I love green tea. So I went to their site, and I was a bit disappointed because they were just selling teas. But I would have imagine they had written articles about how they source their teas, or the ideal time to boil teas, or the water, or whatever it is. These sort of thought leadership pieces, they could have had it on their site. They could have in other areas. And had they done that, and I'm picking intention an example, it's not a super complicated fintech thing. It's the sort of thing that everyone could do. And seeing it, you would see that the founders have a passion. You'd see that, maybe, food mags would start picking it up and so on. And it indicates that pretty much everything you do is part of a marketing that is both for customers and for investors. And in a sense, they're not that different. You want them to reach out and give you money for different reasons. But there, that content creation would have started at the time they'd have created their website, and probably, I've no idea if it would change the investment part later, but I think it might well be important.
Yeah, it's a great, actually a classic place to start from a content strategy point of view, is to write down the first 50 questions you can think that your customers would ask, and they are all those things like how long do I boil tea for? How long do I leave it stewing for? I think Vanessa and I were actually talking about this earlier, that how last night actually, do you want to talk about how last night you were looking at that?
Yeah, so one of the we kicked off our crowdfunding campaign sort of officially yesterday, and one of the first things we did was run a webinar where we took people through our pitch deck and our story, essentially. And that's actually a great way to start, because one of the great outputs of that was that we did a Q&A at the end and tried to answer a bunch of questions, but we got so many amazing questions. We'll probably come away with about a list of 50 that we can now fold into our content strategy moving forwards to support the rest of the campaign. So turning those questions and answers into small pieces of content we can share on social, or do kind of longer blog or article related pieces around them, specific emails, and even further webinars. We're now going to plan another couple to sort of focus on a couple of the bigger chunky topics. So it's a really great way of getting a read from sort of the market very early on in your campaign as to what questions do people have, and what should we focus our content strategy on throughout the rest of the campaign. Obviously, we've got a few things already mapped in, but you want to kind of give yourself a bit of time to be reactive to stuff like that, because that's actually where some of the magic happens.
Yeah, definitely. And good to think that SEO and content tend to take a good few months to start to build up and to really build up on the algorithm. So thinking about that at least 3 months in advance, that you're getting your content out there, is brilliant. Should we answer one of the questions? So one of them is Manuel says, is it a waste of time sending a pitch deck to someone that you've never met or spoken with, i.e. cold email? Also, is it best to meet a person first in person before sending a pitch deck?
I'll take that. These are great questions, and you keep reading, VCs saying we need warm intros and things like that. I think, if it was you and someone was writing to you about something, what would you react? And my take is, if you can get a warm intro, a friend introduces you, obviously so much the better. But if someone drops you a cold email, you may hit delete, but it's going to have some success rate. But I think the key thing, if you are going to write to somebody, firstly, if you're writing to, Seed Camp, they get lots and lots of incomings. So Seed Camp, I know you have a much better chance if you can get somebody who already they know that's going to do an intro. So if you can get a warm intro, great. But if otherwise you're writing to someone randomly, people are generally nice. They're going to probably spend a few moments at least reading your email. And if it looks interesting, and it's put in plain English, not spammy, they may well want to respond. But here's the trick. If you send someone a pitch deck and say, please invest, if someone had written to you and sent you a PowerPoint and said, please invest, of course, you're never going to write a check for £20,000 based on someone sending you a PowerPoint. So you shouldn't expect someone else to. What you want to do is you want to email them to get a hook to the next step. So this is something I learned on one of the pitch events that SeedLegals ran. I was thinking you were going to try and get the investor to invest based on your pitch. And I realized afterwards, what you really want to get is a second date. And the second date lets you do the next step of that journey. So what you want is, do not send, in my view, the pitch deck. You want to send a little bit of info that excites the investor to want to get more. So, hey, we're working on a new platform that does X, maybe a little image that goes with it, some lifestyle image that looks good. If you'd like, I think it would be a great match or something, and maybe investors hate that wording, but business is growing. If you'd like to know more, let me know. Which, by the way, takes me very briefly to, I think, a key thing that investors are looking for is that FOMO and wanting to be part of the next big thing. So basically, everything you're doing is trying to construct a story to show you're going to be the next big thing. And, when I look at Coconut, their messaging and so on, you want in because it's going to be the next big thing in that space. So it's all about, if you have revenue, show your revenue. If you don't yet have revenue, but you've got user growth, show the user growth. If you don't yet have user growth, which is now we're talking about early stage startups, then show the retention growth. If you don't have that, show the number of partnership deals you've got. If you don't have partnership deals, talk about the number of partnership engagements you've got. If you don't have that, talk about the team. So it's really, you're working backwards to figure out what's the best I can do to show traction. And if you think about Clubhouse, there's so much noise about the growth of Clubhouse. Kind of everyone wants in, or at least we think every investor in Silicon Valley wants in, because of the perceived growth. So it's all about fake it till you make it. I mean, in the nicest, not actual scammy way, to entice people to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's so right. And often people talk about getting the first VC investor on board and using that name as your ticket to open every other door and to attract the rest of the investors as well. So one thing that I was always taught as well was use your teaser deck to get the first meeting, use your pitch deck to get to due diligence, and do your due diligence to get the investment. And as you said, just take it step by step and really focus on that what do I want to achieve from this next email or this next meeting? Should we answer one more? Because we've got some great ones coming up. A pre-seed stage startup with product in the market. How do I communicate my traction and pre-money valuation to angel investors? So I think you started to answer that actually, Anthony, before in that find your traction.
That's right. So the challenge you have is, if you've got 25% month-on-month growth, that means your business is doubling every 3 months or something. It's awesome. If your business is tripling every year, that's amazing. So, but the problem is, if you don't yet have revenue, of course, you still need your initial funding to get there to build the product. So you can't show revenue initially because you just don't have it. So what can you show in terms of growth? And growth in its simplest, earliest stage is a spreadsheet that says, this year I'm going to do X, and next year 3X, and next year 9X or something like that. But the problem is that's just made up, right? So what proof points can you have to show that you're actually delivering on some of this? And whether it is you've got your prototype built on time, you've now got it in the marketplace, you've got some people using it, whatever you've got to show signs of growth will hook in the investor. And what investors will do is when you are doing £1 million month-on-month revenue, growing 20% a month, a VC will write you a check for millions of pounds because the risk is quite low. You've got revenue. But when you've got none of that, you can't expect someone to write a big check, but you can hope that someone will write you a 10K check, or if it's a Crowdcube campaign, £1,000 or £500 check, and many people will do it for their SEIS or EIS to take a small bet because you're not at a proof point yet. But even so, you want to show enough validation that they're going to make that leap.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. The Sebastian's asking more about investor FOMO and about the investor webinars. And I thought maybe Vanessa could just talk a little bit about how you've been doing that and about the aim of the webinars and how you get recruitment in the first place.
Yeah, so we've done quite a lot of these through most of our campaigns actually, and before last year we used to do quite a lot of in-person events for these as well, because it's just a really great way of actually bringing people together and being able to have conversations with individuals rather than it being kind of seemingly quite formal. And I think as well, having everybody there, having a number of people there alone, or having a large number of people joining a webinar in itself creates a bit of FOMO, because it's almost showing that, okay, quite a lot of people who are a similar person to me in terms of investment status are interested in this. And that alone starts to kind of trigger that excitement from the very beginning. And that's really, in terms of sort of building lists for that and getting investors to that, I suppose there's a couple of different ways. We've built our own lists over the years of kind of through our various crowdfunds and our pre-seed and seed rounds as well from the very beginning. But also when you work with platforms like Crowdcube, for example, who we work with, that will often, you can often do events with their networks of kind of platform investors and stuff as well. So actually kind of building an audience that way, and then inviting them to those sessions, hosting follow-up sessions, Q&As, and then following up with individuals as well that seem particularly interested. It's been a really good strategy for us in the past.
Can I hop in for some of the questions, because there's some good questions. So let me hop in quickly. So Oliver says, do you know how a personalized intro video might fare along a teaser? So I'm investors, at least professional ones, see many pitch decks, and I think it's super cool if you can make a video. In fact, I'm thinking the pitch deck is dead, just do videos. But of course, some people have a lot of personality and can talk with great passion about their products, and some people, it's kind of more the accounting types. They're going to be great at the numbers, but not great on the presentation. So if you think you can do a great presentation, then maybe a video is good, and you want to persuade people to watch your video for 3 minutes. And if you can use it as a differentiator, then that's fantastic. So I've, got a music app on the side, and, with Ellie Goulding talking about the app, and it's so much more powerful than having it in a pitch deck. So if it makes sense, go for it. But one of the other questions was about making a personal intro video. I think that's kind of interesting. I have no idea if it's good or not, which is like, dear so-and-so, can I tell you, Seed Camp, about my idea? You'll probably wow them with the effort you put in to make that video just for them, and feel slightly guilty to not hit delete based on that. But will it work? I don't know. But I think here's a key thing, which is, one of the key things all product people know is, do an MVP, do A/B testing, try something, throw it away. But you should think about your investor pitches exactly like that as well. I'd be slightly wary to try one pitch at a 4 million valuation, another one at a 1 million valuation, and keep changing. But if people aren't getting your messaging, change it, come up with a radically different view of it, try it with 3 people each and see what feedback you've gotten. And even before, one of the interesting tips is pick your worst investors, the ones who are least likely to invest first, and use them, so that by the time you get to the most likely one, you've got a well-sorted pitch deck and pitch, and the questions they're going to want to ask. So do some testing on the pitch deck.
Definitely. And even if you don't personalize the actual video, make sure you're personalizing the outreach. How do you know that person? Are you connected? That will make them think that you've got something in common. Is there something that they're passionate about that they talk about, that you're answering that question? And that will definitely, pique interest in the first place to get them to watch the video attached to the email or sent. So I think definitely, even if it's not video or deck, it's about that personalized approach and making sure they feel that you're not just sending that same email to 100 people on a cold list.
Can I hop in quickly on that? I think that's actually vitally important, because that might be your in for a cold email. So imagine you wrote to an investor going, hey, I saw your article that you wrote on TechCrunch about X, and I think the thing we're working on exactly addresses one of the pain points you mentioned. Or you've written on food tech a number of times, here's something that might, draw the person in by showing you've done your homework, you understand them, and that's way more powerful than, I got BC seed and I'm one of 50 on your list. So yes.
Yeah, and on that, one of I know one company that had great success using LinkedIn Sales Navigator and actually finding the right investors and commenting on and engaging with their content first before they even connected with them. So they really felt like they were part of the conversation. It felt much more natural at that point when they then said, hey, by the way, I love your thoughts on this. I really believe in this, and this is why I'm building X, and I think you'd be really interested in it. And it just opened up the door and meant it was a lot more of a level conversation in the first place. And actually, just on that, Justin Davidson asks about being primarily a B2C business. How important is LinkedIn for marketing? Asking specifically, do we need to put effort into our LinkedIn marketing as well as from an investor's point of view? My concern is that resources will be spread thinly. So from a marketing point of view, I would definitely say if you're going to just focus on the right channels for your consumers, because that's how you'll show traction, that's how you'll get excitement, which is what will attract the investors. The second part is investors themselves need to do promotion, because often they're building their fund, or they want to make sure that they've got a good they've got a good social standing, so they're getting the exciting pitches to them. So actually, they are likely to be quite active, and the most likely it is on LinkedIn. So if you do have time, then that would be my second choice. But definitely focus on your consumers and focus on how you can build and show that traction.
I'd agree with that. I think as well, like that point about resources being spread too thin, like it's so easy to fall into that, and you're much better off focusing on fewer things and doing them really well, and focusing on making them work and trying to do a little bit of everything. So I think I totally agree with you there, Lucy. Like, go for particularly if you're B2C, go to the channels where your actual customers are, and if you don't have the time and resource to do LinkedIn properly, then I wouldn't say it's the end of the world, but great if you can.
Yeah, and I think that goes back also to Anthony's point about focus on your exact what is your next, what do you need to achieve next, and focus on that each time, so that you're not overawed and think, nobody needs to be on LinkedIn, Twitter, Clubhouse, running Clubhouse events every night, as well as Twitter lives and Facebook and Instagram. You don't need that. You go to where your audience is, and go to them and speak directly to them.
In fact, if I as an investor see you on all of those channels, unless your business is 50 people and you employ a community team, I think as a founder, you're spending way too much time on social media, not on your business. So,
yeah. That's a good point. Moving on just a little bit around that is, how do you, so you've started your networking, you've started reaching out. How can you, as well as Vanessa talked about creating the webinars yourself and bringing people in, but as a marketeer also you think about going to where the investors are. Are there like good events? Are they worth, like you see a lot of pitch competitions and networking events and mixer events. Are they a really useful thing to invest your time in?
I'll hop in. So great question. Before COVID, there were pitch events several times a week in London. And I think they were really good. I mean, if you can find an event where you don't need to pay to be part of it, there are many at WeWorks, Tech Hub when it was around, ran them and so on. So on SeedLegals, if you drop us a note, Tom at SeedLegals can send you our events newsletter, which will keep you up to date with pitch events and so on. But I think pitch events are great. Some of them you have to pay a small amount to present, but it's really, really good practice because you're on stage. I mean, when people are physically doing these things again for 3 minutes, it helps you like nothing else to hone your pitch. You can see the feedback of the eyes in the audience as people just zone out going, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about, or you've got them in rapt attention. So I think that those pitch events I think are important, but I think it's all about the more you make noise, the better it is. And I think posting on LinkedIn is great. Posting everywhere is really good. And the reason is, you're not only after investors, you're after customers, you're after people who want to join and work for your company because it looks awesome and they buy into that dream. You're looking for partnership opportunities. So if you post on LinkedIn, and this goes to a question from Paula, which is, should I create a short and long version of my pitch deck? And I think they're kind of like 3 stages. Stage 1 is a lifestyle picture with 30 words or whatever. That's great to post on Facebook groups, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever, going, hey, working on X, looking to raise, offering SEIS, have advance assurance, picture, let me know if you want more. The next step, and by the way, when you post that, maybe no one will respond, but maybe you'll get a response going, hey, I'm not investing, but my father has got a company that supplies vegan something teas, can I do an intro? So go, that's amazing. So when I've posted those, I get more interesting partnership opportunities than I would have expected. Thing 2 is the short version of the pitch deck. It doesn't have financials, but it's got the hook to want to get to the long version. And the long version has got the business plan and the financials. And generally, my suggestion is you only show those in one-on-one meetings, because the teaser, you don't mind if people reshare, but you don't want to have valuations and business things that actually might change your mind as you've been trying to raise it to 2 million valuation and no one's buying and you've changed it to 1.5. You don't want different versions of the slide deck where investor goes, I've got 2 versions and the numbers are different. So the short version should be one, actually, you don't care if someone forwards it. And the last big one, keep for your one-on-one meetings or when you've got really interested investors.
And actually staying on, that's great advice. And staying on Paula, because she says, how do you approach the conversation about growth when you've been trading for 4 years and grown to considerable revenues, but the growth rate isn't consistent because of the fact that the business is completely bootstrapped and has had little resources? How would you approach that? Is it all about just casing it in, this is the reasoning, this is what happened, and this is how we solved that solution, and this is how the learnings we've got to move forward? I think Anthony probably.
Oh, okay, I'll take that. Right. So, as I said, if you've got 25% month-on-month growth, investors will be calling you. The challenge, of course, is few companies have that, and even if you do, it takes you a while to get there. So how do you solve it in between? And I think there are many businesses that have been businesses that are great businesses for the founders. They've been growing for several years, bootstrapped, and the founders now decide that it's time to raise investment to transform it, maybe from a slightly time and material based business to a scale-up business. Your challenge now is to persuade investors that the next years will be different to the past years. And investors, you sometimes hear the phrase, it's a hobby business. Investors don't like a hobby business. What's a hobby business? It's a hobby business for the founders. It's a great business. You're paying yourself a good salary, you're building a team, you're helping the economy, you're doing really interesting things. But it's not an investable proposition, because if you needed money traditionally, you've got a cheese shop. You'd go to the bank and borrow money, and they would give you some money, which you'd pay 8% interest or something, with a 97% chance, according to the bank, you'll pay them back again. But an investor, that's of no interest. An investor wants a high-risk proposition with a 50% chance they're going to get 5 times their money back in a few years. So the investor wants the growth. And if you go to VC, they want a 30% chance that you're going to have a 30x return. So you need to scale your offering and your proposition to your investor target. And you want to show, in the case of this particular question, business has been trundling along, great. But dear investor, the good news, we're vastly experienced. All the capex to build this proposition, we've done on our own bat. We're not using your money. So, and we validated the proposition, and now we're ready to scale. So turn it around to go, we're not newbies at this, we've built it, but you're going to have to convince them that the next years, you're not going to take their money to increase your salary and keep trundling along. You're going to turn it into a growth business to actually have now your 3x year-on-year growth from here on.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think as well, that's sort of part of, I was talking earlier about when you start having those sort of very early discussions and these questions start to come up, you can really start to sharpen your answers, and that might inform your narrative of your deck or your story, because that we've had this a lot as well with, if you look at certain numbers, we focus on, say, active customers, but they're interested in like new customers coming in or revenue growth, and the story you want to tell or think you want to tell at the beginning may not actually be the one that investors want to hear. So you might need to adapt it, and having those conversations early so you know what kind of questions or things you're going to have to overcome through your storytelling through this process is really good from the beginning, because then they're quite right, like as Anthony said, you're basically saying that's what happened in the past. With this investment, we're going to move to this, and so you can help them kind of take them on that journey of how you'll get to more of a steady growth through the things that you'll spend that investment on ultimately as a result around.
Yeah, brilliant. And actually building on that, Ian was asking, on potential investor classes, my perception on crowdfunding is that most are wary of startups looking for seed funding, and so many fail. So should you have some initial foundation investors before considering this funding channel? And Vanessa, I think you've got lots of great advice on this one.
Yes, I mean we did pre-seed and seed before we went for crowdfunding, and I think that is right. I think it's good to kind of, particularly when you're doing an activity like crowdfunding, you're opening to quite a big potential network of investors, and you're kind of talking quite broadly and loudly about your product. And so often before those stages, you might not necessarily have the kind of full story then actually, and going for that pre-seed and seed round earlier on, just to give you, I think as was sort of, like as pre-seed was 80,000 or something in the very beginning, just enough to get you a team to help build that story, so that when you go to a platform like Crowdcube and you're being more public with your business and your opportunity for investment, you've actually got a little bit more stability in terms of what you do, and as we've already talked about, some signs of traction, and often you'll have probably need a bit of pre-seed funding to get some of those numbers to a good place to tell a really robust story for those platforms.
Yeah, so most crowd rounds, the company has found at least 30 to 50% of the investment directly beforehand. So when it said, the Monzo whatever crowd thing popped in like 3 minutes.
In minutes.
Actually, the last 6 months has been dedicated prep work to get all those investors already on board, so that it does pop, and that's the kind of the secret of crowd rounds, which is avoided if you use angel investors. You can just find them on a rainy Sunday and do a seed fast and take some investment incrementally. So you're going to explore multiple strategies and see what works best for you.
Yeah, definitely. Amir is asking, he's in ride sharing, and the model needs funding, and the model is proven. They've built a MVP, having a more sustainable approach to the needs of the market, and they've got a license to operate in the second largest UK city, but they need funding. How should they get started?
Well, I mean, you're competing, of course, with other many startups, and you're competing with other ride-sharing companies. It's a fairly busy category. So the question is, how are you going to stand out? Number one, with a differentiated offering. It's either the team, which is going to be awesome, and you've got experience, or you've got technology, or you've got traction, or you've got some unique hook. So you're going to have to figure out what is unique to you to stand out. And then, unfortunately, and I don't know the answer here any better than anyone else, to go and reach out to investors. Some of them might be strategic investors who could be partners. Some of them would be angels. Maybe there's a crowd round. Maybe you start talking to VCs. One thing to note is people often talk to VCs too early. VCs will normally come along only when the company's got revenue. And if you approach them too early, the standard response is, you guys are awesome, love what you're doing, come back later. And after the 8th come back later, you go, this isn't really helpful at all. So by all means, take a couple of VC meetings, try and get a couple of VC meetings, but be aware that unless you've got revenue, they're going to keep telling you the same story, which is love what you're doing, come back later. So now, can I go on to one other quick pet point, which is somewhat related, which is dealing with investor feedback. And I'm sure Vanessa's got her war stories on that. So investors, when you go and talk to them, after you've spoken to a few, you'll probably put the class of feedback into 2 categories. One, actually, I've heard this from others before. Half of everyone I've spoken to keeps telling me I should do more of a SaaS business and not one-off billing or something. You'll find a common theme. And the other one is just completely random things. I think you really need to launch in Germany. It's like, dude, where did that come from? So an important thing is what to do with this feedback, and also how to deal with feedback from investors, because investors will, in fact, sometimes give you random feedback to test your character. If you go, that's an awesome idea, I'm just going to do it, investors are going to go, you're all over the show. This is anarchy. If you get really defensive and you become brusque and difficult, investors are going to go, there's no way I'm investing in this company because the founders are just painful. So you want to find the right, way of dealing with investor feedback. That's a really great point. We'd been thinking about a roadmap to go in other countries. Let me explore with my team why Germany might fit in there and see if we can give that a nudge up, for example. You might also then try to figure out the feedback that you have that's in common and update the pitch deck for that. And the ones that are just random things, because investors got these random side peeves, about your domain name. It's like coconut will never work. It's like you want to tell them F off, but you don't want to say that. So you would have some story about how it's differentiated, and you'll talk with your team, and it's really hard finding a domain name or whatever it might be. Or anyway, figure out how to deal with the crazy talk, which is to be nice but ignore it, and the one that fits a pattern, which is to be nice and action it. Yeah.
Definitely, I think taking all feedback as advice, and being clear and having the right mentors to really help guide you through that, so you don't become reactionary trying to change your business model every 2 seconds. And on that, something that people talk about a lot is how can you attract the right investors for you, the investors that are actually going to really support your business and they believe in your business personally, so they'll add their resources and their contacts and everything else to actually help drive, rather than try and manipulate or move it in a different way. Are there any tips that we can pass on for this?
You want to go first, Vanessa?
I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I think if for us and in our experience, some of our kind of the best way we've done that is through actually connecting over the vision. Ultimately, I think that's kind of how you actually sort of get actually on the right level, and that's quite difficult because not everybody is necessarily looking for that kind of like big story. And a lot of investors are kind of more focused on the sharper end of the the traction and the revenue and the finances and stuff. But if you can connect with them at that higher level, you tend to find that, at least in our case anyway, you can have more constructive conversations, and they're a bit more sort of willing to go on the journey of, it's not always a smooth ride, and there will be inevitably bumps in the road, as with any business, and particularly going through things that have happened like in the last 12 to 18 months here. You could never have predicted things like that, and it's impacted so many businesses. But that there's some of the best investors that are still continuing to support us through that in really helpful ways are fundamentally people who believe in the vision of our business and are not necessarily looking at it purely as a short-term return opportunity, but looking to stick with us for as long as possible and really backing us and our team. And I think it's about getting a mixture of those two, because you're not ever going to have all of one and one of the other. But if you can find a few that can help support you from that point of view, it's kind of really emotionally helpful as well, having people like that who are really cheering you on even through some of the tougher times.
Yeah, so my take is investors have many different goals. And in fact, I did a BuzzFeedy style quiz one rainy Sunday some time back where I got piqued by this, which is, what type of investor are you? And I created like 6 categories. I just want my SEIS. I don't care what you're investing in. If you're offering SEIS, I'm in. The second one is change the world. I know your business probably won't make money, but we all hate plastics in the oceans. I'm in if I can help on that. Return on investment, not important. The next one is, I'm fixated on a return on investment. I don't care what you do, but I'm looking at the numbers. The next one might be the lifestyle one. I want to hang out with the cool kids. This looks like a lot of fun. You're going to give me free coffee as well? Excellent, I'm in. And the next one, which is probably one to be wary of, which is an investor. Maybe there's someone who's sold businesses or retired or made some money, And they kind of want to be a founder, but they want to be a founder on your shift. So they love your business, they want to invest, but I'd like to be an advisor on your board. In fact, I insist on being, I want to give you advice. At some point, dude, you're coming on too strong. I'd like your money. Send me advice. I do not want another founder in my business. If I wanted another founder, I'd find another founder. So one of the things you really might want to do is to actually, instead of getting on a call and just broadcasting what you're doing to the investor, spend a moment talking a bit about what you're doing, and then ask about them and what their driver is. And when you go to VC meetings, you'll find very quickly that meetings start off with, hey, the VC says, let me tell you about our investment proposition. And you should then really listen to that, because they're giving you the cues to use, if you're smart, to hone, as you're talking and winging it, the key things that they've said to tag later on. And if you can tap into that, so, find out from your investor. Maybe you'll find it from LinkedIn or their other investments or their public posts, the things that turn them on. Or otherwise, just ask them, what are the things you're looking for in an investment? And they'll go, great, thank you. Now, let me tell you about what we're doing. And then if you hook into those things they've mentioned, they see, firstly, that you listen, which is great. They perceive that you're probably going to listen to your consumers, which means you're going to be doing something that consumers want. And thirdly, of course, their messaging, magically, amazing. This is exactly what I've been looking for. How did you guess? It's like, I have. So yes.
That's such great advice. And a popular question on here, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. Do you have any tips for generating warmer introductions so reaching out to an investor feels less cold? I think definitely starting with how can you engage in what they're interested in first, and thinking about do you have connections? Are there connections you can see? Do you know people that they know that might be willing to introduce? Have you got a mentor that is able and willing to, make those initial introductions and help you sell? I think, what about everybody else? How do we find those warmer ones, and how does it feel less salesy and less
you could be quite shameless and reach out to people that know the investor. So I have people ping me going, hey, it looks like you know X on LinkedIn, can you reach out to them? Actually, if I really do know them, I probably would be happy to do it. There's a small problem that LinkedIn shows I know way more people than I've actually ever known in real life. So when I go look them up, it's like, we connected in like 2018. I don't think I've ever met them. But that doesn't stop you giving it a go, right? So, if it works and the person can do an intro, that's great. And I've actually done some intros. Don't hit me up to do that, please. But I've done some where SeedCamp's actually invested in the company, which I was blown away by. So, yeah.
The Canva founder, Melanie, she said that she's an introvert, but all she really wanted was she believed in her business and she would do anything. So she had to really swallow that fear and just go for it. And she would turn up at people's offices. She would go to events, go introduce herself and do anything she could do just to make those good intros. And you think that generally that's for people that are just really confident and love doing that. But actually, if it's your business and you really believe in it, you have that sort of extra get up and go to really, really make that happen. A good one from Ryan. So fintech and construction, great traction, number of signups, but they really need money to be able to get the line of credit to lend funds to the customers. Does a VC provide that equity debt deal? And is that the right place for them to be going to look for it?
Sounds like one for me. So, in the past, there were, once upon a time, the only way to get money was to borrow it from the bank. But as I said earlier, banks will only lend when there's a very low risk because they get a low return. And then came VCs and equity fundraising, high risk, high reward, but the investor wants equity in your business. So the question is there something in between? And actually, there's a growing range of debt finance, which is designed more for startups. So ClearBank is one example. Silicon Valley Bank is more of a bank that lends, but knowing with the startup risk profile. But there are others as well, and I think Swoop Finance, for example. And some of these will essentially lend you money based on future revenue projections. Some of them, which is quite interesting, will lend you money only to spend on Facebook or Google advertising. So if you've got a business that you've got product market fit, and the only thing you need is more money to spend on marketing, oddly, people will lend you money to give straight back to Mark Zuckerberg to buy customers, but based on the fact that, if your LTV, your lifetime value, is greater than your CAC, your customer acquisition cost, then you've got a scalable business. And by the way, when you talk to investors, words like acronyms like LTV, CAC, and other things should be ones that you understand and even roll off your tongue. You shouldn't litter your pitch deck with acronyms, because not all investors know it. But if an investor does ask you what your LTV is, and you think that's something about vehicle weight, then it's going to be a short conversation with the investor. And so go research some of those terms first. SaaS, MRR, ARR. And if you know that stuff, investors will understand that you've thought about not just making your widget, but actually growing a business with the monetary proposition afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Naveen is asking for a recommendation of marketing agencies that work well with startups. Vanessa, what did you guys do? Because I think it's the way that I would probably answer this is more, well, definitely email me, but also think about actually what you need. Do you need an agency, or is it a number of freelancers or support? And how do you scale that in the first place? So really looking at what's your needs for the next few months and really starting there, hiring in as leanly as possible until you get that funding. But so maybe an agency is the right option. There are lots of wonderful, great small agencies, but also bringing in the right amount of freelancers, be it part-time on project basis, to really get you to that next phase where you have the money to start building your marketing team. Vanessa, what did Coconut do?
I totally agree with that. Quite a lot of my background is working for advertising and marketing agencies over the years, and so I kind of understand both sides of the coin quite well. And I've always, since being Coconut, kind of tended to avoid the agency route, particularly at our stage, just because I've found it, and again, it totally depends on your needs and actually what you're looking to do. But for us particularly, it's really difficult to bring an entire agency on the journey of your business. And actually often at this stage, when you're still potentially finding product market fit, honing that story and that narrative, you need to be in the weeds of the business to really get it and to really crack it. And it's very difficult trying to translate all of those goings on inside the business with an external agency that are also serving 5 other clients at the same time. So agencies are great. They can do an absolutely brilliant job, and they can bring in a whole host of skills that you don't have internally. But I've always tended to go the freelancer route at an earlier stage, because you can bring the right set of individuals in based on what you need with the right skills to get to the right place. But you can bring them in much more closely to your business. You can work much more closely with them. You end up having a sort of better working relationship where you can really sort of like figure the gritty stuff out together, rather than it feeling like a sort of back and forth relationship.
Definitely. And Naveen's just answered and said freelancers at this stage, tried Fiverr. So I don't want to knock any platforms, but I think what you're looking for is recommendations at this stage and finding that. So if you can find that through your network, then that's great, because it is, I mean, it's an outlay that you don't want to go wrong from a timing and a cost point of view. The other, if you're looking at other platforms, definitely I love working startups, angel list, the dots as well. I would make sure you have a clear brief for what you want the freelancer to do before coming in. That will help make sure that they can work efficiently. But also, don't be scared about getting referees before they start. Any good freelancer will have people that can give them reviews, and pick up the phone and talk to them, because I think that would help to negate that problem of anybody can write anything on their profile, but you want to make sure they've actually got the that experience before you start bringing them in and investing in them as well.
Yeah, by the way, I think one problem is people often perceive they need some help on their pitch deck. I need someone to make cool graphics on my pitch deck. But actually, it turns out as soon as you find someone to do that, it turns out the next problem is you just don't have a business plan. And the real problem, the graphics and some lifestyle images and bold graphics is nice, but it just very quickly leads to slide 18, which is, what's your revenue model? We've got nice Insta photos of people riding bicycles and holding your widget. So now you have to find an advisor that's going to advise on the business model. So you might put this into sort of 3 categories. One, just pitch deck. Companies like Robot Mascot and so on are great at that. 2, I've done some numbers. I need some help turning this into a coherent business thing. Or 3, I'm great at writing code, or I'm a doctor. I have no idea what the business is. Can someone design a business for me, please, and work out what my pricing model and other things should be? And there are people for each of those that specialize, and some do all of them for a larger fee, and some will just do one of them for a smaller fee.
I think that's brilliant advice. Just looking at the clock, we are over time. I just want to really thank Anthony and Vanessa. If anybody has any more questions, please connect with me on LinkedIn or on email via my website. I'm sure there's the same for Anthony. How do people sign up to get all the for SeedLegals?
So if you drop a note, Anthony at seedlegals.com, or pop connect on LinkedIn. I'll send you a link to our events newsletter. Otherwise, if you browse on SeedLegals resources events, you'll find lots of info on London, Manchester, other events around the country. These days, of course, mostly on Zoom. And you can also sign up for our events newsletter, which is packed with information.
And Vanessa, how about you? And how do people get involved in the crowdfunding, this next crowdfunding round?
So you can head over to our pre-registration page, which is getcoconut.com/invest, which went live yesterday. And so there's a bit of information about our pitch there, and we're working on our pitch video at the moment. So that will be up there in a week or so as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you've had a great day, and thank you very much. I'll speak to you all soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.